My name is Elena Ward. I'm 34 years old, and I was just erased from my family's will while lying in a hospital bed with my right arm in a cast and 3 screws holding my wrist together. The envelope came with a polite knock from a hospital assistant. She smiled faintly, placed the folder on the nightstand, and said, "It's from a law office in Durham. They said it's urgent." I opened it with my left hand. It took longer than I wanted, fingers trembling, not from pain, but from something colder. Inside, one sentence broke me more than the fall ever could. Per the signed addendum dated July 3rd, 2024, you, Elena Marie Ward, have been formally removed as a beneficiary of the Ward estate. Removed while I was still wearing a hospital gown, while the bruises on my ribs hadn't even turned green yet, while my arm was still so swollen that the nurse had to cut open the sleeve just to adjust my sling. 3 days earlier, I was walking home from the train station, end of shift, light rain, earbuds in. A cyclist blew through the red light. No lights, no warning. I landed wrong, right wrist snapped back, ulna fractured, bruised ribs, minor concussion. Not life-threatening, thank God, but I blacked out for long enough that I woke up with an IV in my arm and a dull pressure behind my eyes. First thing I asked the nurse was, "Has anyone called?" She looked at my chart, then back at me, shook her head. "No, sweetie, no one's checked in yet, maybe your phone's off." There were no missed calls. Only a voicemail, time-stamped 7:48 a.m. the morning after my surgery, from my mother. "Hi, sweetheart, it's Mom. Just wanted to let you know we're flying out this morning. Florence this time, finally doing that wine tasting tour. Don't worry, we'll send pictures. Oh, and I used the travel card for the upgrades again. Hope you don't mind, ciao." I listened to it twice. Same tone she used when she called about pumpkin spice candles being on sale. They were on a plane. My mom, my dad, and my brother Matthew, taking their dream vacation, with my money, while I was lying in a hospital bed, unable to brush my own hair. It wasn't the first time they'd used my card, but it was the first time they'd left me completely behind. Let me back up. I'm the one in the family who got this stable job. The one who always had it together. The one who fixed things. I'm a financial crimes investigator. Government badge, federal clearance. I chase shell companies and fraud rings across spreadsheets and subpoenas. But somehow, I couldn't spot the scam happening in my own home. For the last 6 years, I'd been sending money home, helping with emergencies that never seemed to end. A broken water heater, a car note, then it was just a little extra for Matt's business idea. Then another. I thought I was helping, but what I really did was train them to treat me like a bank. Until last month when I finally said, "I need to pull back. I'm planning to buy a place." My mom's voice cracked. Dad said I was being dramatic. Matt didn't even respond. Just posted a meme on Instagram about selfish women in tech. And now this. Alone, in a cold room, with a cast on my arm and a letter in my hand telling me I was no longer part of the family I'd been financially holding up for 6 years. My phone buzzed again. Another charge from my travel credit card, $4,312, $60, Hotel Belfiore, Tuscany. A nurse entered to check my vitals. I pretended to be asleep. Then I heard a different voice. Calm, slight southern drawl. "Ms. Ward." I opened my eyes slowly. A man in navy scrubs was standing by the door, early 40s, kind eyes, stethoscope around his neck. He held a clipboard but didn't look at it. "Doctor Reyes," he said. "Just checking on your wrist, but also, honestly, just wanted to check on you." I didn't know what to say. He walked over, adjusting the bed slightly, gentle with every movement. "You don't have to say anything," he added. "I just figured sometimes the worst pain isn't in the bones." And for the first time since the voicemail, I let myself breathe. There's a moment when the painkillers wear off and the silence settles in that you start to see your life not as a timeline, but as a pattern. And mine had a theme. Give, be quiet, repeat. I started sending money home at 28. Not because I had to, but because I thought it meant something. That it proved something. That if I just gave enough, they'd finally see me the way they saw Matt. My brother had always been the headline act. Tall, athletic, charming in a Southern boy way. He dropped out of college after his sophomore year because, in his words, it didn't spark joy. But every failure was reframed as potential. Every screw-up, a stepping stone. He started an artisanal ice cube business once. Bought 3 chest freezers with my money. When I asked how it was going, he said, "The real value is in the branding." The next month, the power bill doubled, and I paid it. Without asking, it became a cycle. Mom would call, always with a sigh at the start. "Honey, I hate to do this, but..." And then the reason would shift. The pipes froze, the car battery died, Matt's camera broke. Dad's blood pressure monitor needed replacing. The flower shop needed a new fridge. The old dog needed a root canal. The new dog needed emotional support chew toys. I had a spreadsheet on my work laptop, hidden in a folder named Q3 Compliance Templates. Every month was color-coded. $1,200 for the mortgage, $450 for groceries, $800 for Matt's projects, another $300-400 labeled as buffer because someone always needed something. The total? Usually around $3,000 to $5,000. Some months it crept closer to $7,000, but I never told anyone, not my friends, not my coworkers, not even my therapist back when I still had time for one. I told myself it was my role. After all, I worked in government finance. I made decent money. I didn't have a family of my own, didn't go on vacations, didn't even own a pet, so it made sense. Right. I became the invisible scaffolding holding up a house I hadn't lived in since college. No one offered to pay me back. No one asked if I had enough for myself. And the truth is, I didn't. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with a leaky faucet and outdated appliances. I drove a 12-year-old Honda with a dent in the door. My vacation was 3 days in Asheville, alone, in an airbnb with patchy Wi-Fi. But I never complained. Because somewhere deep down, I believed that if I just kept helping, eventually, they'd help me back. That maybe someday, when I really needed them, they'd show up. I was wrong. The hospital accident changed things, not just physically, though the cast was a daily reminder, but emotionally, spiritually. There was something about seeing my name crossed out of the family trust like a typo that cracked the illusion completely. I wasn't the daughter, I was the sponsor. A silent one, and worse, I had trained them to believe I'd never stop. 3 days into my stay, Dr. Reyes brought me coffee. Real coffee, not hospital sludge. He didn't say much. Just handed it over with a little sticky note on the lid that read, "You matter." I stared at that note longer than I stared at my phone all day. I didn't know how to tell him what was eating me alive. That I had wired thousands of dollars to people who couldn't even send me flowers. That I had traded peace for approval. That I had made myself essential, not lovable. So I told him the only thing I could. "I think I've been paying rent on a family that never really let me move in." He didn't laugh, didn't say, "Oh, families are complicated." He just nodded and said, "You know what I learned in the field? The loudest people in the room usually owe you the least. But the ones who stay when things go quiet, that's your real tribe." That night, I deleted the family banking app from my phone. I didn't freeze the cards yet. Didn't change the passwords. Not yet, but I moved the spreadsheet to the trash. I didn't open it again. Back when I was a kid, my dad used to call me the easy one. The one who didn't throw tantrums, didn't argue about curfews, didn't need new dresses or ask for rides. I wore that like a badge, for years, but now I realize. That title came with a price. Being the easy one meant being the forgotten one, the one who drove herself to her graduation, who patched her own jeans, who learned to keep receipts, not memories. And now, I was done. No more silent sponsoring, no more emotional overdrafts, no more begging to be valued by people who couldn't even remember the color of my eyes. Next part, I make the first move. I wasn't just going to take back my money, I was going to take back everything. There's a difference between being alone and being left behind. I'd gotten used to the first, but the second, that one still bruised like bone. The third morning after the accident, I woke to the gentle buzz of hospital machines and the ache of Velcro straps digging into my shoulder. I'd barely slept. Pain was one thing. But the emptiness, that silent echo of absence, was something else entirely. No new calls, no missed texts, no photos from Paris. I stared at the ceiling, waiting for the nurse shift change, hoping they'd forget to ask, "Any visitors today?" Because I hated the way I had to say no like it didn't burn my throat. That's when the knock came, twice, soft, intentional. "Ms. Ward, you awake?" It was Dr. Ray's, same navy scrubs, same warm coffee in hand. He stepped in slowly, like he knew how fragile mornings could feel. "I brought backup," he said. He held up a small white paper bag. "Half a banana muffin, contraband, don't tell the cafeteria." I blinked at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Instead, I just nodded. He sat beside the bed, didn't reach for the clipboard, didn't ask about the swelling or the bruising or the recovery timeline. Instead, he said, "I know that look. I wore it for almost 6 months after Afghanistan." I looked at him surprised. "You served." He nodded, gently tearing the muffin in two. "Field medic, Navy, mostly trauma work, a lot of waiting. Waiting for choppers, waiting for backup, waiting for news you didn't want to hear." There was a long pause, but not uncomfortable. The kind where silence isn't awkward, it's earned. "Sometimes," he added, "people assume if you're not bleeding, you're fine. But grief, that's a slow bleed. It hides under polite words and good posture." I didn't mean to say anything personal. I didn't plan to. But something in his voice, calm, steady, utterly unflinching, made me open a door I had kept sealed for years. "They didn't call," I said quietly. "Not even to check if I could still write my own name." He didn't flinch. And that's what hurt most. I nodded. "No," I whispered. "What hurt most is that I expected it, and I still gave them everything." That became a rhythm. Every morning 9:15, Dr. Ray's would stop by, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with soup, once with a book, to kill a mockingbird. "Because Atticus Finch would have called," he said, smiling. "Sometimes we talked. Other times we didn't." He had this way of sitting beside the silence, not trying to fix it, just keeping it company. He never asked about my job. Never questioned why a woman like me, smart, salaried, independent, would send half her paycheck to people who didn't even sign her cast. But he noticed things. Like how I always looked away when someone mentioned the word home. How my shoulders tensed when my phone buzzed. How I pretended to nap when the room got too quiet. One afternoon, he brought in a Bluetooth speaker. Soft jazz hummed through the corner of the room, Ella Fitzgerald, Miles Davis, Coltrane. The notes hung in the air like warm candlelight. He didn't say anything. Just placed the speaker on the tray and left the room. That night, I finally slept. On the 6th morning, I asked him, "Why do you keep coming back?" He looked up from the monitor. He was adjusting. "Because I don't think people should only be checked on when it's convenient." I swallowed. "You don't even know me." "Maybe not, but I see you." That phrase, "I see you," not your resume, not your usefulness, not your profile picture or tax bracket or LinkedIn job title. Just you. And somehow, that felt like more family than my actual family ever managed to offer. Later that evening, the sky outside the window turned soft lavender. The kind of light that makes everything look a little more forgiving. I sat up slowly, one arm still stiff, but no longer helpless. Nathan, I'd started calling him that now, had left his thermos on the chair again. A sticky note was folded on top. "When you're ready to get angry, I'll be right here. And when you're not, I'll still be here." That was the moment I realized. Some people stay for what you give them. Others stay for who you are, even when you're empty-handed. There's a kind of clarity that only comes after silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that follows betrayal. It was a Thursday when I started. My wrist was still stiff. My ribs still ached every time I shifted in bed. But my mind, sharper than it had been in years. Dr. Ray's Nathan had just left after our usual 9:15 check-in. He brought me ginger tea and one line that echoed louder than any voicemail. "You can mourn and still take action. One doesn't cancel the other." I looked at my phone. 3 new charges. $312 Rome Vespa rentals, $880 Amalfi Coast Sunset Cruise, $104 monogrammed luggage tag. The monogram was mine. I closed the banking app, opened a secure browser, and logged into something I hadn't touched in almost 2 years, the master control panel for all Ward family accounts. I had set them up myself, streamlined, color-coded, synced with bill pay and credit alerts, because they didn't understand online stuff, because it was easier this way, because I was the responsible one, because they knew I wouldn't look too close. Until now. Step 1, freeze. I froze all 5 credit cards under my name, 3 of which had been maxed out this month alone. I flagged the luxury travel charges for fraud and requested bank investigations. When the confirmation message popped up, asking, "Are you sure you want to report this as unauthorized?" I didn't hesitate. Yes, I'm sure. Step 2, lock. I changed every password: banking, PayPal, Zelle, Venmo, even the emergency backup Gmail my mother used to help monitor bills. Gone 2-factor authentication, Face ID only. Secondary device secured, no more open windows. Step 3, cancel utilities, phone bills, the family Netflix, Dad's cloud golf subscription, Matt's premium analytics tool that auto-billed every month but never generated a single report. Canceled, one by one, like snipping puppet strings. Step 4, sever the cars. Both were in my name, the insurance, the title, the payments. One for my dad, a pearl gray SUV with leather seats. One for Matt, a sporty red coupe he used to impress clients. I called the dealership. "Can I request a repossession? As long as the contract's in your name." "It is, I'm the sole signer." The voice on the other end went quiet. Then, "We can dispatch a truck tomorrow." Good, I didn't want revenge. I wanted clean hands. Step 5, retrieve. I made a list: my grandmother's necklace, my college diploma, birth certificate, social security card, a stack of handwritten letters I'd once mailed from abroad, all returned unopened, and a little sketch, a drawing I did at 10 years old, framed in plastic, forgotten in a hallway drawer. Things that were mine, things they wouldn't even think to sell because they never thought they mattered. Nathan helped me print it out. He didn't ask questions, just looked over the items, then asked gently, "You want company?" I nodded. The hospital approved a half-day release under medical escort. Nathan borrowed his cousin's pickup truck. He packed 2 pillows, a folding wheelchair, and a soft blanket just in case. When we pulled up to the house in Durham, it looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile. Like a stage set someone had forgotten to dust. The lights were off. The front porch still had the same chipped planter Mom never got around to repainting. No one was home. I still had the key. We entered like ghosts. Inside, the air smelled like lavender spray and entitlement. I didn't touch anything that wasn't on the list. I moved slowly, methodically. No rage, no drama, only presence. The necklace was still in Mom's old jewelry box, buried under a fake pearl set she wore to church. The diploma was shoved in a hallway closet, still in its mailing tube, never framed. The sketch, folded behind a stack of expired coupons. I stared at it longer than anything else. A little girl with messy hair holding a paper star. I didn't remember drawing it, but I remembered how I felt when I did, invisible, but hopeful. Before we left, I walked into the kitchen. On the fridge was a note from Mom. "Connor, don't forget to grab the wine before your spa appointment." Beside it, a grocery list in my handwriting. The last time I visited, I restocked the entire pantry. They had thanked me with silence. I grabbed a sticky note, wrote 6 words, "I'm not your sponsor anymore." I stuck it under the fridge magnet shaped like the Eiffel Tower. And then I left. That night, back at the hospital, Nathan made us tea. We sat by the window. He didn't ask how it felt. He didn't need to. He just said, "You did it." And I realized I had. Not all of it, but enough to begin again. It didn't take long. 3 days after I shut everything down, froze the accounts, canceled the cars, repossessed the silence, I got the letter, a summons. Not to apologize, not to reconcile, to court. filed under emotional harm and financial misconduct. Filed by my parents and my brother. They claimed I'd abused financial access. That I'd deprived the family of resources essential to their well-being. That I'd severed ties without due process. Due process, as if I were a department store returns policy. Nathan was reading the papers beside me, his mouth twitching in disbelief. They're suing you for not continuing to let them use you. I nodded, and calling it harm. He placed the file down. Do they know what you do for a living? I looked at him, smiled softly. They never cared enough to ask. The hearing was scheduled for 10:00 a.m. on a Thursday. Family court. Durham County. I wore navy. Hair pulled back, minimal makeup. Flat shoes. Not because I wanted to look small, but because I didn't need to look loud. I carried one folder. Black. Leather. Inside, a decade's worth of wire transfers, contracts, signatures, notarized titles, account logs, and IP activity. And one letter, signed by my agency's legal department, verifying my clearance level and field status. They were already seated when I walked in. My parents on one side, my brother behind them. Mom in a beige shawl holding tissues. Dad in a suit that still had the tag stitch on the vent. Matt scrolling his phone. They looked up, and for a split second they faltered. Not because I looked intimidating, but because for the first time, I didn't look like I needed anything from them. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a wedding ring worn smooth from time, reviewed the case summary. Then she looked at me. Ms. Ward, do you have legal representation? I'll be representing myself, Your Honor. She nodded. Your family accuses you of cutting off financial support without notice, causing distress, and damaging their quality of life. Do you wish to respond? I stood, yes, I do. And calmly, without raising my voice, I began. Your Honor, for the past 6 years, I've sent a monthly average of $4,700 to the plaintiffs. All voluntary. All undocumented. There was no legal obligation, no contract. No shared assets, only verbal requests and my silence. I handed over a folder. This includes receipts, bank statements, emails, and screenshots verifying every payment. The judge flipped through the pages. Her brows twitched only once at the highlighted charge for a dog birthday party labeled therapy expense. Additionally, I continued, 3 credit cards were used in my name without my consent. Over $15,000 in charges from European retailers while I was hospitalized. I turned. Your Honor, I was in a sling, with 3 fractures and a concussion, not sipping Chianti in Florence. The courtroom was still, so still you could hear the AC kick on. The judge looked at my mother. Mrs. Ward, is this accurate? My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. She never said no. We thought she understood. Did she ever sign any legal document agreeing to provide financial support indefinitely? No, but she's our daughter. That should mean something. The judge raised an eyebrow. It does, but it doesn't mean she owes you money. My father cut in, voice trembling. We raised her, fed her, put a roof over her head. I turned to face him, and I paid off that roof. Twice, including your refinance in 2020 when the loan defaulted. I also paid the taxes. Matt finally looked up. This is unbelievable. You're acting like a stranger. I looked straight at him. You lived in that house rent-free for 7 years. You took 3 business loans under my name. You used my credit to buy a car you crashed within a month. I didn't report it. I paid the insurance. And when I asked to pull back, you posted a meme calling me greedy. He said nothing. The judge sat back. Ms. Ward, you said you had employment documentation. I opened the final letter, walked forward, handed it over. Your Honor, I am a senior investigator with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, under the U.S. Department of the Treasury. I oversee fraud investigations, asset tracking, and anti-money laundering compliance across multiple sectors. My clearance level is TS-SCI. That's top secret, sensitive, compartmented information. The room shifted, not loudly, but perceptibly. Even Matt's jaw dropped just slightly. I looked at the judge. I have never taken from this family. I only gave. Quietly, consistently, at my own expense. I did it because I believed that's what love looked like. My voice cracked, just for a second. But when I was injured, when I needed someone, they were gone. Not just emotionally, physically. They used my card to fund their silence. I paused, then said clearly, I am not suing them, I'm not pressing charges. I just want it on record that I've stepped back. Financially, legally, emotionally. I took a breath. I am not their sponsor. I am not their wallet. I am not their shame sponge. I am not their fallback plan. I am Elena Ward. And I get to stop. The judge nodded. Case dismissed. No grounds for further action. Ms. Ward, you are free to go. As I gathered my folder, my mother whispered, You think this makes you strong? I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. No, I said, this makes me whole. Nathan was waiting in the hallway, a to-go cup of tea in his hand. He didn't ask how it went. He just handed me the cup and said, Ready to go home. And for the first time, I didn't flinch at that word. Home used to be a place, an address, a room with floral couches and old church magnets on the fridge. Now, home is a moment, and sometimes it's a person. It had been 6 weeks since the court hearing. 3 since I was discharged. 1 since I unpacked the last of my moving boxes. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, modest kitchen, walls painted a color called Whisper Beige, which felt like something someone named with a secret. It overlooked a small pond near the edge of Chapel Hill. Ducks visited in the morning. Teenagers skipped rocks at dusk. And me, I watched and healed. Slowly, Nathan had helped move the last box, didn't make a big show of it. Just carried the bookshelf I was too stubborn to donate and said, Where do you want your future to go? I pointed to the window, facing the light. He nodded, no commentary, just understanding. We didn't label anything between us. Didn't rush. Some days he brought coffee. Other days he brought silence. Both were welcome. I started therapy again, not the kind where you just recount pain, but the kind where you learn what you gave up trying to earn love. My therapist asked me once, What would it take for you to feel safe without earning it? I didn't know the answer, so we started small. I bought myself flowers. I said no without apology. I stopped explaining why I wasn't attending birthdays or holidays. When my mother texted a photo of a broken garage door with the caption, We just don't know what to do, I replied simply, I'm sure you'll figure it out. No venom, no guilt, just truth. She didn't respond, but I didn't need her to. Nathan started leaving things at my place, not on purpose. A toothbrush, a folded hoodie, a box of tea labeled for difficult days. One night I found a post-it on my fridge, his handwriting. Your fridge deserves kindness too. N. Inside were groceries, labeled, portion-sized, balanced, not out of duty, out of care. No one had ever fed me that way. On a Tuesday evening in late November, the power flickered during a rainstorm. I lit candles. Nathan arrived with soup. You always show up, I said. No, he replied, sitting beside me. I just don't leave. We sat in silence for a long time. Outside, rain tapped the window. Inside, my body, for the first time, wasn't bracing for the next request, the next crisis, the next disappointment. I looked at him. Can I ask you something? Always. Why do you care? He smiled, that quiet kind. The one that feels like a warm scarf wrapped just right. Because I've seen what it looks like when someone loves from duty. And I've seen what happens when someone is loved by choice. And Elena, you deserve the second kind. I cried that night, not because I was sad, but because the ache was finally leaving my chest. Like a room that had been locked for years, suddenly flooded with light. Weeks later, I took a walk around the pond. My cast was off. My steps were slower, but mine. I passed a couple on a bench, older, laughing over something in a newspaper. A young girl flew past on roller skates, shouting to no one in particular. I'm going so fast. And I smiled, not out of habit, but because I could. That evening, Nathan brought over takeout. Indian food, too much naan. Always too much naan. We ate on the floor, backs against the couch, candles flickering like memories being rewritten. After dinner, he reached into his coat pocket. I got you something. I raised an eyebrow. Is it a dog? No. A weapon. Also no, although slightly dangerous in the wrong hands. He handed me a small box, wrapped in soft cloth, tied with string. Inside was a ring, not flashy, not elaborate, just a slim band of brushed gold. And inside, a quiet engraving, no more silence. I looked up, and he was already on one knee, not dramatic, just sure. "Elena Ward," he said, "you've survived things you never deserved. You gave love to people who didn't return it. You carried more than anyone ever should. And yet, here you are softer, not smaller. I'm not asking you to need me. I'm asking to stand beside you. As your friend, your equal, and your husband. Will you marry me?" The room was quiet, not the heavy kind. The kind that holds space for joy. I nodded. "Yes," I whispered, and for once in my life, I didn't feel afraid of forever. I just felt chosen. Later that night, as he held me under the quilt, no words, no promises, just presence, I thought, this is what safety feels like. Not because it was offered, but because I finally said yes to it.